The Miró Quartet.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
You're sometimes Miró Quartet.
Sometimes.
Or the Miromi.
Miromi with you.
That's right.
Miromi.
We are now Miromi.
We have a group chat text thing going.
Miromi.
Yeah.
It's quartets.
It's very special.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts collectively. I've asked you individually, but if you have collective thoughts about what a string quartet collection of instruments should be.
Oh, yeah.
And what you're striving for as an ensemble, if you're striving for anything.
I mean, one thing I think we all look for in our instruments is an equal balance of finding blend and unity with each other, as well as individuality to each of the voices. We don't want things that sound too similar, I think. We experienced that in the past, and that didn't work so great.
We've gotten really good with just quartet skills and years playing string quartets of actually making things that we have, kind of no matter what they are, work together. Mm-hmm. But when we had instruments that were too matched, we had a hard time getting individual voices out. So I think in some ways we just pick the instruments that we gravitate towards individually, and then figure out a way to make them work in the quartet. Mm-hmm.
I actually think that we've settled into instruments for each of us that really represents each of our own voices. Mm-hmm. If I think about the four that are here, it's taken a couple of years. Some of us found them right away. Some, you changed cellos a couple of times.
I have changed cellos.
But you went through a lot of switching about 8 years ago.
Yeah, but I haven't really done switch since then. But
Mine was the most recent.
Yeah, so you guys are kind of locked in now. This is or at least you know what you're kind of looking for.
Yeah.
I think if something wonderful came along,
until we don't.
Well, I mean, but honestly, like if something wonderful came along for one of us and we fell in love with it, we'd make it work.
Yeah.
We wouldn't. I mean, I don't think there's anything that could be too strikingly different that we couldn't figure out a way to get it to work in the quartet.
Well, and I think the concept that also goes with how we kind of think about our parts and roles in the quartet is what is it that your voice wants to say? So find that instrument, and as you grow and change, your voice changes, or as you fall in love with a different instrument, that changes. And so then it's like, well, now we have a clear indication or intention of what your voice is. So let's figure out how we all work with that. And that's been a concept we've used artistically in the quartet, but I think it applies fully to what we do with our instruments.
John Largess.
Masumi Rostad.
That's me.
That's
you. You're holding a viola.
It is a viola.
I recognize these things.
Do you? I mean, it's good after all that training you've had. Years, decades.
Yeah. Is it training or abuse?
I don't know. I mean, it's a violist.
Yeah. No, but you got a beautiful fiddle here.
Yeah. Well, this was made for me, believe it or not.
Yeah.
This is a modern instrument made by the luthier Frank Ravatin, who's French.
Yeah.
And it's a really actually very interesting story about the instrument and how it came to be, because it's originally part of a matched quartet that Frank made for the Miró Quartet.
What?
Yes, totally. So we had a donor, Mark Firth, it was like 21 years ago, who was very much into modern instruments and really loved Frank, and he wanted to commission. He really believed that he wanted to sort of showcase what a modern maker could do for a quartet. And so he got Frank to make 2 violins, a viola and a cello, all out of the same wood, all in the same year, and we got this matched set of instruments, which was kind of a little bit of a splash at the time. We were on ABC News Tonight with the instruments and stuff like that. I was surprised that people thought it was so interesting. And the long and the short of it is we played those instruments as a quartet together for 2 years, and then they were so matched.
Yeah.
They were like, we don't want to play these anymore. You couldn't hear the second violin.
Oh, interesting.
It was so blended and so similar that it was really, really hard to make individuality stick out.
It's funny because it's something you learn when you're playing a string quartet.
Right.
It's like you're trying so hard so often to achieve blend, and then you disappear.
Right. Then you have then there's only blend and no you.
Right.
And certainly for a voice of the second violin, we wanted to be able to hear. It was Sandy Moto who was playing that time, but you want to be able to hear things coming out. The quartet was that matched quartet of instruments by Ravatin was particularly amazing if we were in, like I remember we had we did a recording session for Sirius Radio, and we did a broadcast of a Mozart quartet, and it was like the most dry, awful, horrible closet-like recording space.
I know it.
And you know very well, it sounds terrible. But with those instruments that had all of this kind of like similarity of sound and blend, like even in a dry closet, it sounded like a beautiful quartet. Which was lovely. That was lovely. Of course, you don't play in dry closets that much.
Right.
And if you're in like a big boomy resonant hall, it was not so great. So, and in the end, there were a bunch of different reasons why people didn't like the instruments. So we stopped playing them. But I really liked this. And part of the reason why I liked it so much is because when Frank was interviewing us about what we wanted for an instrument, hope he doesn't watch this and think I'm being too blunt, but he had me play a couple of the instruments he was making before, and he was like, well, what do you like about my instruments? I'm like, I really don't like your instrument. I don't really like these very much. I like bigger instruments. I like more bassy instruments. I like more dark instruments. And we had a conversation. He was very open about like, what are you looking for? Describe the perfect viola to me that you want. And I told him, again, like I want something with a little longer string length. I want something that had a little bit more of a bassy sound. I'm not the biggest guy, so it can't be giant, but I'd rather it be larger than smaller.
Why longer string length?
So what I used to play an instrument that was much bigger than this, and I like the spacing with my hand, even though my hand is small. I find it interesting, more comfortable, and
there's a word for that.
Yes.
Masochism.
You're not the first to have used that terminology with me. The other thing, though, I like about a little bit of a longer string length, particularly on a viola, and that was part of our conversation that we had, and I'll get to what the upshot of that was, is that a longer string length does mean that the tension of the strings is overall a little higher. Longer string length for the size of the body means that, you know, if it's shorter string length, the shorter it gets, that less tension you have to get low tones on like the C string. So I found that it's nice to have just a little bit more tension, a little bit wider spacing, and then an instrument that's not that big. And this is 16 5/8. So I was talking to him about all these different things. He's like, you're describing a viola that I know and I love. And I said, really? He said, yes. There is a Tecchler viola in the Cité de la Musique Museum in Paris. He's like, I've always wanted to make a copy of that. And you just described that instrument to me.
So was he able to get measurements? Was he able to like...
So that's what this is.
Yeah. Wow.
So, I mean, it's not exactly a copy. It's his interpretation of that form.
Yeah.
But this is basically, it's a Tecchler form viola. And this is the first version of that model that he made. And I think it came out really good.
Yeah.
And he really liked it, and I really liked it. And afterwards, I think he pretty much only makes this model. Yeah. Or at least for the next 10 years, I haven't seen what he's made. Most recently, he's not making maybe quite as many instruments now. But for the next 10 years, all the new instruments I saw from him were this model. Yeah. So that made me very happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like it a lot. I mean, and it has the things that I like. It has a big enough C string. It has enough projection on the A string. In quartet, as you know, in some ways, the most problematic strings, I think, are the D string and the G string, because you're playing with violins a lot,
right, sure.
But also you're playing with cellos and on the A string when you're on the G string, in Beethoven quartets and stuff like that. And just finding a way to sort of blend the middle strings in a way that are not, that actually work with violin and cello. And also I think most violas, the weakest string is the D string. I think I've played many great violas, old instruments too, and you know the G string, the C string, and then sometimes a lovely A string, but often some kind of weird resonant hole on the D string area, and this doesn't have that. Yeah. So that makes me very happy. So it covers your bases. It does. It's exactly what I like. Yeah. So it's fun. I have tuners on it because we are very picky in the Miró Quartet about checking our strings with each other. And I just switched to the rondo set of strings. Okay. after using a very specific set of strings for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm still kind of a fan. I used to always use the spiral core tungsten C string, and I do still like that.
Okay.
I'm considering putting that back on.
I see.
I do like
A little more cut.
a little more cut. I find that it's more stable. It doesn't move a lot in a concert. And it's just slightly higher tension, puts a little more tension on the bass side of the bridge, which I think is good for the instrument, this instrument at least, in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of the story with that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Will FEDKENHEUER.
Masumi Rostad.
All right.
Here we are.
Here we are.
I got my fiddle.
Hong Kong style.
Hong Kong style.
Yeah, you got your fiddle. What's your fiddle?
I was trying to remember actually. Hold on.
You've forgotten.
No, I didn't forget what it is.
Because you have so many. You forgot which one you brought with you.
I have a wide collection.
Yeah. Do you really?
It consists of this one.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I do have my original, first expensive violin, which was, they're both modern instruments. So this one that I play on now is by Peter and Wendy Moes,
Oh, all right.
who are very well known for their violas and cellos.
Sure.
And actually, in 2008, they made a big shift in their violin model. And what I was looking at is this was started in 2010 and delivered in 2011. So this is my violin that I've been playing on since then. It was made for me. It was a commission. I was playing on an old Italian violin that I knew was moving onto other hands. And so I went around and played a lot of modern instruments and got to know a lot of makers and decided to commission one with them.
And that's like a real commitment because then you're locked in, right?
Yeah, although I felt really comfortable with them because I had a number of friends who were collectors who owned Strads and Amatis, they are the couple that they bring those instruments to adjust for sound.
Yeah.
And so I had this violin that I've been playing on for a long time. And so not only was I trying out their instruments, but I was having them work on my instrument. And what I knew was they were going to make a really beautiful, well-crafted instrument. And then I also had experience with them crafting sound. And so however the initial sound was, I had developed a trust and a confidence that we would be able to figure out how to get the instrument and its voice and its color into a place that I would really love, and that's been true.
Were you in the quartet by that point? You were?
Well, no. Well, it kind of crossed the boundaries.
Okay.
So that was an interesting phase because I was first violin in the Fry Street Quartet.
Yeah.
When I commissioned it. And before it was delivered, I had moved to be second violin of the Miró Quartet.
Yes.
And so when we talked about the instrument initially, we talked about certain characteristics and colors and, a brighter and more,
and then you're like,
projection
emergency
sound.
phone call.
Well, it was funny because what we talked about was because they are the makers, they really had a sense of what the violin could do and what they had built it to open up into. So when the change happened, they said, "Oh, well, let's just see how it goes." So they didn't actually really change anything.
Yeah.
They just kept making it and finishing it. It was in the end phases anyways. And so then I played it, and I played it in, with I don't know, have you ever commissioned an instrument?
No.
So it was new. It was the first time at this stage of my career that I commissioned one. But you go through a number of bridges and sound posts over the first 2 to 3 years because the instrument's stretching and adjusting, and you're learning a lot about it. And so every time we got together, if we did a new bridge or a new sound post, we were just tempering how the violin was growing and the kinds of things I wanted out of it. So it's been an amazing experience. And
congratulations also on not having it antiqued.
Oh
which
my
I
gosh!
particularly like.
Wow!
I think it's bold, but I think it's beautiful.
Well, they do not do it.
Yeah.
So it's very red. I mean,
but it also has now 10 plus years of wear on it, which looks very human.
Yeah, and they're really well known. They're fairly famous for their varnish, and their feeling is that this is what the great instrument makers. This is how they finish their instruments, and so that's what their intention is, because it has a different chemical composition, and then the wear and tear, and how that affects the growth of the instrument over time.
Sure.
And so they refuse to antique it. And I mean, when I got it, it was so bright red, and we'd walk on stage, and the guys would always be making fun of me. But now it's just kind of red, but it's got a super beautiful back, and I mean the whole thing has just been a real gift to play, and it's steady and it's stable and it travels all over the world.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Josh Gindele.
Sir, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Tell me about your cello, please.
It is a cello made by a gentleman named Lawrence Wilke
Okay.
in Clinton, Connecticut in 2009. I actually got it from our good friend Nick Tzavaras.
Did you
who's
really?
The cellist of the Shanghai Quartet.
I went to high school with Nick Tzavaras.
Yeah, and he was my roommate in college.
Yeah.
So I heard him, we played an octet concert, and he was playing this cello.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, that sounds awesome. I love that. I said, if you ever want to get rid of it, let me know.
Yeah.
And he goes, how about this? I'll sell you the cello, and then we'll just have Larry make me another one. So Nick has the twin cello to this.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I traveled for years with an old instrument, and just the climate changes, quartets, going back and forth from hot, wet climates in the winter to New York to other places. The strings would let loose and the bridge would fall down, and it just became such a hassle. And this thing has been rock solid. So yeah, it's been great.
So it's like just good, consistent life.
It's literally every time I pull out of the case, I know exactly what it's going to sound like. I don't have to worry about anything being out of whack because it just is really healthy. Yeah.
And is that why you chose it for the quartet, or is it? Was that a consideration?
I chose it for the quartet because when I heard Nick play it, it just sounded
In his
like,
quartet.
In his quartet.
Yeah.
But it sounded like what I played the Bass of Spain Strad on a couple of recordings, and it was a feeling like that instrument really sounded like my speaking voice. You know what I mean? Like it just felt like it just felt right.
Yeah.
And this, I can't afford the Bass of Spain.
Yeah.
So this was about as close as I could get. And it's got a kind of big, bassy, thick kind of sound at the bottom, but I can get out of the texture at the top of the instrument. So it works really great in the quartet.
Great.
Yeah.
And do you ever mix it up? Do you ever play other instruments?
I owned a second cello for a long time. I actually sold it to one of my students a couple of years ago. But no, I mean, as I've gotten older, I've gotten less particular about like what I play, strings, bows. As long as it's consistent, I know what I'm getting when it comes out of the case. I can manipulate it to do what I want it to do.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? I'm not looking for the instrument to do that much for me anymore.
Yeah.
It just needs to be there and sound good.
Nice.
Yeah.
And
So I've gotten low maintenance.
and that's the cello for it.
That's
nice.
It's beautiful. It's worked out great. So thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
But his cello sounds fabulous too. So
Yeah.
And Larry's actually made a lot of cellos for a lot of great cellists. Des Hobig. He made one for Starker years ago. He is a cellist himself and only pretty much makes cellos.
Cool.
So it's been great.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Daniel Ching.
Masumi Rostad.
Since the last time we played together,
Yeah.
pre-pandemic,
Yes.
you had a different fiddle.
I totally had a different fiddle. You noticed.
Yeah.
It looks totally different.
Talk to me.
All right. So prior to 2021,
Yeah.
I had been so my wife Sandy, who used to play in the quartet, she was playing on a Testori cut-down viola. It was a big violin, but great for second fiddle because it had this kind of deep, dark tone. And I've always liked this instrument.
Yeah.
So when she left the quartet, and she was like, I think I'm going to sell it. I said, no, actually, I want to play it. So I played on that violin for many, many years. So I played it as the first violin from 2011 for about a good 8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
Maybe 7 or 8 years. And the point I'm getting at is that I actually for this long period of time, I actually didn't really have a violin that was mine that I was playing on. I played on hers, and then eventually I gave that violin up, and then I started playing on my father's old violin, a Biziac, a modern Italian,
Yeah.
for a couple of years. And
I didn't know your father was a violinist.
he's a violinist.
Wow.
And he's 86.
Yeah.
And he wakes up every morning and still practices scales.
Wow. Puts us all to shame.
He makes me feel bad about myself.
Practice.
Exactly. Practice. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah.
So during the pandemic and in 2020, 2021, we were all kind of, looking for things to do. And it was during that time that I kind of fell into a situation where I was in a position where I could actually look at getting a violin like a violin that I would
Crypto. You did crypto?
This is not sponsored by crypto. If you're listening out there, guys, I'm open for sponsorship. So I kind of knew what I was looking for, but I just, so 2021 was really the year where I started taking trips to shops in New York, and I ended up forming a relationship with Colin Maki, a young former violinist who is now a wonderfully successful, wonderful violin dealer in New York. And he and I just got talking. We were talking about, what is it you're looking for? He knew the quartet. He knew, first violinists and quartets is not the same as a soloist would want, because you're not looking to just stick out all the time. You're not looking for that kind of voice. So he asked me what I was looking for in a fiddle, and I told him I had always kind of gravitated more toward more darker sounds. We've heard plenty of great violins that have beautiful E strings and A strings, but I always kind of look for more chocolatey sounds and dark. As a violist, you're
Well, you were trained by your cut
that's
down
right,
viola.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I like that story so much.
Yeah.
And so he asked me, so we talked, and then one day we had been trying a couple of different violins, and it wasn't quite hitting the point what I was looking for. And then I remembered this violin I borrowed from the Juilliard collection when we were in residence there. They have this beautiful collection of amazing instruments.
Yeah.
And I remember calling the curator, Eric Grossman, and one day I was like, is there a violin down there in the collection that I could use? And all the Del Jesus, all the Strads were out to all the Queen Elizabeth, everyone going to Tchaikovsky competition.
Right.
And he's like, there's nothing really there except there's a Goffriller that hasn't been played on in about a year.
Yeah.
Like nobody wanted to touch it. It was just sitting there. It wasn't the shiny Strads and Del Jesus and Amadis and Guadagninis. And I said, I'll take a look at it. Sure. I took it home for a couple of weeks and, had to wake it up. And I eventually fell in love with this violin. And it was to the date that I was looking for a violin for myself, my favorite violin. And I had just recalled this. This was 20 years prior when I played this violin, but I remember this, and I had this violin for a couple of years. And so I told this to Colin, and he's like, oh, really? That's the sound you're looking for? And I was like, that would be great. I know that they're not selling the Goffriller they have.
So he goes in the back room. No.
No, yeah, kind of.
What?
So he goes, I have a phone call to make. And I'll call you back. Give me a couple days.
Wow.
And so I was waiting in anticipation. I was like, this is it. Maybe he's going to call the Juilliard collection. Maybe Eric is like, not many people are playing this violin. But so he calls me back. He said, I have one.
Yeah.
And I said, what? And he's like, it's a really special one. We've known this violin for a while. And so he said, come back here when you can. I said, I got a ticket to leave like the next day. I mean, this is pandemic time. I wasn't doing anything else.
Right,
So I flew back up, and he brought this violin out, and he wanted me to play on it, and I played on it. I was like, this is amazing. This is, it feels a little bit like it hasn't been played for a while, but I knew the bones of it was just, it had a lot of the qualities I remembered from the violin before. And then he proceeded to tell me where it came. I asked him, I said, where is this coming from? He said, Well, so this is Ruggiero Ricci's first concert violin. When he was 16 years old, he was able to, I think his parents gathered enough resources to send him to Italy to pick up this violin. The dealer there had come upon it and thought it was good for him.
Yeah.
And so he went there and immediately bought it, played it for when he was between the ages of 16 and 20. I mean, he was already in his full-fledged concert career at that time, but this is the beginnings of his concert career and before his Strad and before his Del Gesù and his Storioni. And so at the end of his life, he had his violin, concertized on it for 4 years, and then he sold off everything else at the end of his career except for this.
Yeah.
And so when he passed away, before he passed away, what was really special too, Colin also pulled out these photos. Maestro Ricci had photos of the violin taken, front, back, and ribs, and he had signed each one, and it said, "This Goffriller was my violin from," I don't remember the dates exactly, 19 blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
"This was my first good violin." And he signed all 3 of these photos.
Wow.
So this was very sentimental to him.
Yeah.
So I'm the first one to play on it since he acquired this back in the 1930s. So, and I love this.
Is it known as the Ex Ricci?
They don't. I don't.
Like
it is now.
Yeah.
It should be now.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if they name, Goffrillers, but
Sure.
I
they do.
No, it's a beautiful fiddle.
It is gorgeous.
Yeah.
I'm kind of ogling it.
It's
a piece of candy.
It's very nice, and I
Yeah.
feel very fortunate,
No.
to play on this thing. And
Congratulations.
thank you. Still discovering new things about it. And I've had it for 2 years now, and still every day is like a new adventure.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you can do that, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see what else you can do. All right.
Yeah.
It's like driving a nice car.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, you can quarter.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, you can do this.
Yeah, push it a little
you
harder.
can fly.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there it is.
Well, we are backstage, and you do have a concert to play.
Yeah.
Here we are in Hong Kong, right? So, would you mind playing a few notes before we go out on the stage?
We would love to.
Good. Great.
Good answer.
Let's do it.
No, it's all right, all right, all right.
Well, he does it well, all right.
That's true.
That's all we got.